All right, guys, so we started notes on Congress, or topic for the legislative branch. If you were here for the beginning of notes, you can just skip ahead in this video to where we left off. Otherwise, just follow along, and I'll give you the fill in the blanks as we go through here. So as I mentioned, topic 4 is on the legislative branch. That is the lawmaking branch of the federal government. Most often we identify that as Congress, which is made up of both the House and the Senate. So Congress is both a lawmaking institution and a representative assembly. So it has a split personality. So your first fill in the blanks are lawmaking institution and representative assembly. Now, what do those things mean? A lawmaking institution means that Congress is tasked with making public policy for the nation. So public policy is your fill in the blank. Now, public policy would be like those laws that affect us as Americans. They're also a representative assembly, meaning they're tasked with representing the interests of their diverse constituencies. So they're tasked with representing the interests of their diverse constituencies. I'm going to try writing out constituencies here for you so that you can spell that out. Let's see here. Constituencies. So if you want to make note, a constituency is just the group of people that a congressperson represents. So for someone like Kevin Cramer, who represents the state of North Dakota in the U.S. Senate, all North Dakotans would make up his constituency. So as a representative, as part of a representative assembly, he would be tasked with representing the interests of North Dakotans. Now, the interests of North Dakotans may not always be the same as the interests of people from New York or people from California. And so Congress people have to kind of create that balance where we're making public policy for the whole nation, but each of their constituencies has much different ideas about public policy and how the federal government should act in certain policy areas. So as a legislator, as a congressperson, they have 5 major roles, and so I want you to add an example of each role to your note sheet. So we're going to start with legislator. So under example or definition, a legislator makes a law. We'll talk about how this actually happens from start to finish when we do our project towards the end of the week. But they're going to propose laws, discuss those laws, vote on those laws. Legislating is really just the act of making a law. Second, they have to be representatives of their constituents. So I kind of mentioned this in the last slide, but someone from North Dakota should represent North Dakotan interests. So an example might be someone from North Dakota voting on a farm bill that helps agriculture in our state. So the next role would be to be a committee member. So committees are where most of the work in Congress actually gets done. Congress is made up of, in total, 535 representatives. And so without dividing into committees to kind of divide and conquer, it just becomes kind of like a big, crazy group project. So most of the work is done in committees. Now, what committees do, for your example or definition, is they review proposed bills. So they decide which bills that are proposed are actually going to make it to the full floor for consideration for debate of all 100 senators and 435 House members. There is also a committee on oversight. So on the screen here you see the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. You can see that's been a long-standing committee in the House of Representatives. It was established in 1816, and their main goal is to serve kind of the oversight function. So they want to carry out the oversight function, which is a vocab word, and basically it means that Congress checks to see that the executive branch is carrying out the policies that Congress set. So way back in topic 1, we said that the executive branch has to enforce public policy. But what happens a lot of times is we have a president who's a different party than the majority in Congress. And so there can be some self-interest involved where the president may not want to enforce public policy that has been passed by Congress. And so the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is going to serve that oversight function, where they're going to check and make sure that the executive is actually carrying out the policies that they're supposed to be enforcing. So then our fourth role is to be a servant of constituents. So this is done a lot of times in the local offices of our congresspeople. So for example, they might help someone receive their Social Security benefits, or maybe if you need to expedite a passport and the passport agency isn't really working with you, your congresspeople actually have direct phone numbers for some of these different government institutions where they can get a hold of the Social Security office in a much more direct way, in a faster way, and they can make sure that you're actually getting those federal benefits that you should be receiving. Along those same lines, they can help you out with those passport applications. One of the things that we helped out with a lot when I interned for a U.S. Senator is we worked on immigration paperwork. So as you can imagine, when someone immigrates to the United States, and they're maybe not as well versed in English as someone who is native born, then lots of that government paperwork can be really complicated. We know that even just with tax forms, they're really difficult to fill out, and we're native English speakers. So senators, representatives can help with that sort of application too. So they do all of that stuff basically just to serve their constituents and help them kind of work through what we call the red tape in government. So then their last role is to serve as politicians. And so a politician is a person who is professionally involved in politics. Now, a couple examples, the most obvious one would be holding a political office. So whether that be being a senator, a representative, a governor, the president, probably be the best example of politicians, but there's plenty of people who are professionally involved in politics that never hold political office. Maybe they're just really popular, they're really interested, and so if they give a speech or if they go on the nightly news, they can talk about politics and people will listen. A lot of the media and those nightly news shows will interview politicians, political experts, and so those people may not have ever held public office, but they're kind of serving a professional role in politics. All right, so that sums up kind of the 5 major roles of congressmen and congresswomen. So we're going to move on to voting methods. So voting methods are some different ways that politicians or people who hold political office can really think about how they want to vote on a particular bill. And so they could choose to vote as a delegate. And so a delegate is when they vote as agents of the people who elected them. In other words, if a poll showed that 70% of North Dakotans wanted so-and-so to vote yes on that bill, if they were serving as a delegate, they would vote yes because a majority of their constituency agreed that that was the best option. The second option is to vote as a trustee. So a trustee believes that each question must be decided on its merits. So in other words, we're going to look at all the facts, all of the data involved, and then make the best decision based on the information that we have. So this isn't really a political decision. This is just, we're going to evaluate the facts and the resources and determine whether or not this is going to be a good thing or not. And then their next option would be to be a partisan. And this is the one that Congress today is accused of being most of the time. And so partisans believe that they owe their first allegiance to their political party. So if the Republicans or the majority of Republicans are going to vote yes, a partisan, if they were a Republican, would also vote yes. Now, these are three kind of concrete voting methods, but at some point, Congress people are probably going to use each of these, maybe depending on the bill it is or depending on the situation. We call that being a political. So political attempts to combine the basic elements of the other three roles. All right, so this is a question that we discussed in class just regarding voting methods. So take a minute to read through the question here and then write your answer in the box. All right, we're going to move on to the next section here on notes. So we're going to look more at just some basics with Congress. So we'll start with the North Dakota delegation. These guys are all going to show up on your final for this class, as well as the test on topic 4. So we're going to start on your note packet. The furthest left-hand picture is of Kelly Armstrong. He's a Republican from the state of North Dakota. So when you see on the news or whatever it may be that like R or D slash and then 2 letters, that would represent which party they are and then which state they're from. So Kelly Armstrong is a Republican from North Dakota. He is the House of Representatives member from the state of North Dakota. And he was actually just elected in the last campaign cycle. Prior to the last campaign cycle, Kevin Cramer filled in that seat. So then in the middle on your note packet, you have John Hoeven. He's a Republican from North Dakota, and he is the senior senator from North Dakota, meaning he's been there the longest. He's been there a few terms. So when it comes to your test, you'll have to know who's the senior senator and who's the freshman. Obviously, the senior senator has been there longer. And then Kevin Cramer is a Republican from North Dakota. He's the freshman senator from North Dakota, and he was just elected in the last campaign cycle. Again, he filled that House seat before moving up to the Senate. So just some basics here on when Congress convenes and then a couple of vocab words for you. So the new term begins on January 3rd at 12 noon. Now a term is a 2-year period of time during which Congress meets. So a term lasts 2 years. A House member has to run every single term, meaning they have to get reelected every 2 years. Now, you have 2 sessions in each term. So a session is a period of time during which each year Congress assembles and conducts business. Now, a session today actually spans most of the year. A session back when the Constitution was written maybe would be a month or maybe 2 months that they would actually meet. But this, in this day and age, they meet most of the time with some recesses or breaks that would be during the year. But they're working most of the time. Congress is a very full-time job. All right, so next we're going to go through and we're going to sort some different things into your graphic organizer that's on your note sheet. So we have the House of Representatives, both, and then the Senate. So as I mentioned, Congress is bicameral, meaning it's a two-house legislature. So we have the House of Representatives and then the U.S. Senate. So first, 100 members belongs in your Senate category. We have 100 members, 2 from each state. So we're based on equal representation in the Senate. And if you remember back to topic 2, that was a compromise that was made in the Connecticut Compromise to kind of reconcile the differences between small states like New Jersey and big states like Virginia. Must be a resident of the state they represent. That belongs in the both category. So if you're going to represent the state of North Dakota, you have to have your permanent address in the state of North Dakota. Popularly elected means that they're elected by all of us, and that actually belongs in the both category as well. Prior to the 17th Amendment, it was only the House that was popularly elected, but the 17th Amendment changes that, and the Senate now is as well. To serve in the U.S. Senate, you must be a citizen for at least 9 years. U.S. Senators also serve a 6-year term, so they only have to be elected every 6 years. And then this last one actually belongs in your both column, rank and file members, so that would just be kind of your average members, not filling any leadership roles or anything like that. Rank and file members earn $174,000 per year. All right, so this next bullet point says that this chamber has more rules that govern behavior, and that actually belongs to the House. The House is a much bigger body with 435 members as opposed to 100, and so that means they need more rules for how to conduct business. The House also tends to have a narrower focus on policy, so they're lots of times more focused on domestic policy, that's stuff happening within our boundaries and that sort of thing. This next bullet point belongs in your Senate column. The Senate has a higher cost of election. On the flip side of that, though, they only have to run every 6 years. So a House member may spend as much running for maybe 3 races in the time that a senator would have to run for 1. So then House members serve a 2-year term. The Senate is actually considered the more elitist of the 2 chambers. And this last one belongs in the Senate as well. They can attach non-germane riders onto a bill. So if something is germane, it's related to the topic. So to be able to attach non-germane riders, that can actually cause some problems in lawmaking. For example, someone might be working on a federal budget that started in the House and now it's in the Senate, and they can attach maybe a rider that would maybe change some things regarding immigration, and maybe it has nothing to do with the budget at all, but that is the power of the Senate, and maybe that's why, or one of the reasons why it's kind of considered more elitist. They have less rules, they can kind of bend the rules, play more politics, that sort of thing. All right, so we're going to pause here for a think, pair, share. So nearly a third of the present members of the Senate once served in the House of Representatives, but none of the current members of the House ever served in the Senate. So again, this kind of goes with that idea of the Senate being more elitist. So many of the men and women who serve in the House today look forward to the day when they hope they'll sit in the Senate. So jot down a couple ideas on kind of the side of your notes page there. Why do you think representatives would rather work in the Senate than the House? And then we shared out in class as well. All right, so next one here, we said a senator has to be a citizen for 9 years, so then that means this bullet point belongs on the House, so they have to be a citizen for 7 years. The Senate has more foreign affairs power, so they get to approve treaties and things like that. The head of the Senate, according to the Constitution, is actually the Vice President of the United States. However, the Vice President doesn't really serve in that position all that often. They'll maybe show up to break a tie and that sort of thing, or they'll show up for historic votes. But a majority of the time, this is kind of just a title and not necessarily a working job. All right, so for this one, the larger constituency that actually belongs in the Senate as well. The Senate represents the whole state. So the whole state of North Dakota, the whole state of California. Now there's an asterisk by this one because there are things called at-large districts, and that's actually what North Dakota is. North Dakota, we have just one House of Representatives member because we're such a small state, and so that House member serves the same number of constituents as our 2 U.S. senators do. In California, this is a much different story. California has over 50 people in the House of Representatives, and so those people each represent around 750,000 people, while the senators represent the population of the whole state. So the Senate has the power to remove federal judges, or you could say to just remove federal officers in general. We're going to talk about kind of the impeachment process in a minute here. All revenue bills must start here. That belongs in your House section. So any bill that has money attached to it has to start in the House of Representatives. You must be 25 years old to serve in the House of Representatives. All right, so then the power of the filibuster belongs to the Senate, and the filibuster, that's actually a vocab word that we're going to cover in a bit, so I'm going to come back to that. The House could have 100% turnover on election day. It's unlikely. I don't think it's ever happened. However, everyone has to run every 2 years, so it could happen. Senators are actually more likely to be reelected than House members. House members have fewer staff members. Again, they have kind of a narrower focus on policy. They don't have as many responsibilities in terms of foreign affairs and things like that, and so they're going to have fewer staff members that work for them. Today, the Democrats have the majority in the House, while the Republicans have the majority in the Senate. And the House, like I've mentioned already, has 425 members. Finally, to run for the Senate, you must be at least 30 years old. All right, so we're going to talk about this idea of incumbency. So incumbent is a vocab word. An incumbent is the existing holder of a political office. And we said with the Senate that they're especially more likely to be reelected. So your second bullet point there says that most incumbents win. And this is very true in the Senate, but it's also pretty true in the House of Representatives. So a couple reasons why. One would be name recognition is huge. Lots of times, if you've already served political office, you have more money being donated to your campaign, and money does help win elections. And then we also have something called safe districts. And so safe districts are districts where the winner wins by more than 55% of the vote. And this could be due to something called gerrymandering, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. So we're just going to recap some qualifications here. They're all on your sheet for you already. Those are the things that have to happen for you to be able to run for political office. However, there are some informal qualifications. So informal qualifications are the things that we expect of someone running for office, but they're not constitutionally required. Informal qualifications have changed over time. Obviously, we've seen some recent changes in regards to race and gender. And what we used to expect is maybe different than what we expect today in regards to that. We probably expect some experience, some education, things like that. So try and come up with some informal qualifications that you can add to your box there. So then we have demographics. We're going to look at more closely at this graphic in a minute here, but we'll start with gender and race. Over time, Congress is becoming less male and less white. However, the Senate is more slow to change. The first woman Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. I'll spell out her last name here for you. Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, her first term as Speaker was in 2007, and she's also the current Speaker of the House.